I'm Jason Ross Jr. of DetroitSportsMedia.com. Here with my guest this morning, Wendy Hilliard, founder of the Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation and Hall of Fame gymnast, Wendy Hilliard. Wendy, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Wendy, what does the city of Detroit mean to you?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, it's my hometown. And so everything that I became is really because of Detroit. My family, my education, my gymnastics, my sports. So I have a big affinity to the city. So now I kind of call myself mid-coastal. So I go between Harlem and Detroit. But I'm really proud to be from Detroit.
And you started out in the gymnastics at a very young age here in Detroit. How did that happen? How did you get into it?
You know, I saw gymnastics on TV, watched the Olympics and just got crazy about wanting to do gymnastics. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of gymnastics in the city. So I started like at the Fisher Y. We had a tumbling team with Dr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Julius Lee, who was working there. And we found out that he was a great coach, so we had this really tumbling team. But I really wanted to do more all-around gymnastics, and so I went out to the suburbs, and there were some coaches out there at the Jewish Community Center, right, in Southfield. Mm-hmm. And as it happened, the Detroit Recreation Department, Mr. Leon Atchison, hired these 4 coaches to work for the Detroit Recreation. So they had these coaches from the former Soviet Union, Vladimir, Zina, Mike, and Rosa, and they started training us with this really great system of gymnastics. And as a result, the Detroit team, we were called the Detroit Metro Gymnasts. We became, national champions, nationally ranked, international, lots of great things. Then I switched over to rhythmic. Rhythmic didn't become an Olympic sport until 1984, mm-hmm. and it really wasn't popular at all in the United States. But Zina, the head coach, was a specialist in rhythmic gymnastics. So most of the rhythmic gymnasts at the time were former what they call artistic gymnasts, so we could all flip and do rhythmic gymnastics. Mm-hmm. But that's when I switched, when I started being coached by Zina Marinoff.
Mm-hmm. What was her influence like on you?
Oh, big. Big. Zina, she was such a force, I will tell you that. All of my teammates, and we had, there's a whole group of us. We trained together 6, 7, 8 years, and we all have our little sayings. But Zina was a visionary. Besides being a really great coach, she really, her level of excellence that she demanded from all the kids, but also we had this really interesting Detroit energy and then this Soviet Russian energy. She's actually from the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So it was, we all learned to speak a little Russian. I actually studied Russian, so I speak a little bit more. But it was a very interesting combination, and her influence for me was amazing, both from as a coach and as a mentor, and as I went on, because I went on to become an Olympic coach, and I used some of those same techniques that she taught me, and also Vladimir, so it was pretty profound.
What was it like competing internationally?
Oh, it was exciting.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I was flying in, and I was thinking at the time when I was competing on a regular basis, I was going internationally like every other month. And places like the old Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, France. I mean, it was very interesting that I was constantly on the plane. But it was different because, it was exciting, but also, there are very few, I was the first Black to compete for the U.S., and so oftentimes when I would compete internationally, I was the only Black. I felt like in the country. I'd be in Poland, and I didn't see any other Black people anywhere. Yeah. But we were so well trained, and I think the experience gave me a worldview of life. And the one thing is that all of us athletes, even though we were from different countries, we all had this one common thing. So it was a respect we had for each other. So it was a really great experience.
And you mentioned being the only Black. Did you ever use that as a motivating factor when you were approaching your gymnastics?
Not really. That's a very interesting question. I'm Black. So
Mm-hmm.
there we do. It was a challenge. I have to say this. I think it made me stronger because I was from Detroit. There's a difference of traveling to different countries and being the only Black, but being able to be home in my school, in my church, in my family, in my whole city, was reaffirming to my self-confidence. I will say that much. So even though I may have felt all alone in the middle of Eastern Europe, when I came home to Detroit, I had such great role models and supporters here that It was challenging. I mean, one year they wanted to do, in rhythmic gymnastics, they have what they call a group routine. It's a synchronized routine. And everyone's supposed to, look the same, do the whole thing. And this one year, they said, well, Wendy, you stick out too much. You can't. I was like, are you telling me I can't do this because I'm black? And at first, I was just blown away because I didn't think that would still happen. But, we had to fight it. I called my parents crying. I was very upset. But, we wrote USA Gymnastics and they changed it. So that part of it was very defining. I mean, I knew that I think for the rest of the world, seeing a black athlete was new to them, which was great. But as I said, we had the respect, and I came from a strong background, and so we made it work.
And when you're about to go out and compete in front of an audience, in front of these other athletes you're competing against, what's that like when you're about to step out there? What's going through your mind?
What you're doing is you're just trying to calm yourself down. That's the one thing. Gymnasts practice a lot, a lot of repetitions. And the reason why we practice so hard is because sometimes when it gets to competition, you're on autopilot. It's more a mental game. So you're really trying to calm yourself down, to remember which parts of the routine you may have had trouble with in practice. But the reason we put all that hard work in is because when we step on the mat, you have to be confident in your skills, and it's challenging, but that's what we do. That's what we signed up for, and you just have to get it and go, because once the music starts, once the routine starts, there's no do-overs, you can't try it again. You just get that one chance, and I think that makes us stronger individuals overall because you're responsible at that time to do your best.
And it really is fascinating how many hours gymnasts put into their craft. What did your average day, average schedule look like growing up?
We train, so it's I was thinking, because I'm speaking at a group later today, a men's awards dinner, and my dad used to wake me up in the morning to go run around Palmer Park just for conditioning, and I didn't like running, but every morning I would do that. And then as I got older, I'd practice like a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours by myself at Northwest Activity Center, and then we'd practice another 3 or 4 hours with the coaches. I mean, it was 5-6 days a week, training 4 to 6 hours each time. We got used to it. It requires a lot, but that's what we wanted to do. You have to have a lot of ballet training. A lot goes into that practice, but we were elite athletes, and that's what you got to do.
How tired were you at the end of the day?
I was tired, but it's, as when you're an elite athlete, you have to know that that's part of your training, actually, that you have to get enough rest. You have to watch what you eat. It's a constant, everything around your life depends on that. To be at your peak as a physical athlete, you have, what you eat's important, how you sleep. So I was tired and I would be sore, and it was just, that's part of the deal. But in the end, I always was focused on what my ultimate goal was to be the best athlete I could be, to be the best gymnast, which required day in and day out work.
And what competitions did you compete in overseas? In your years, maybe 15 to 20 years old, what were you doing at that time?
We had all different levels of competition. So they have invitationals that are invite international invitations. We represent the U.S., but I also competed in 3 world championships, and that was always exciting because at the time, as I said, it was right before rhythmic became an Olympic sport. I did compete in the Olympic trials for the United States, so that was our first Olympic trials. I didn't make the Olympic team, which was very difficult, but they only have 2 athletes. So you just do your best, and I did a lot. I've won some medals. It was very interesting. So oftentimes I will say in Europe, they appreciated my style of gymnastics because it was different from when I was black, so they didn't see black athletes or black rhythmic gymnasts. And then, as I got older, Zina, even though I had a lot of Russian music routines, she let me use a few Motown pieces of music, which really put that together, and so the Europeans really liked my performance style. So I felt very warmly received when I was there. It was exciting.
And something else that fascinates me about gymnasts, you retire at a relatively young age compared to other sports. Were you ever thinking about retirement at some point in your career?
No, Not really. I mean, I competed relatively long for a rhythmic gymnast into my 20s, and now actually athletes can keep competing longer because you do your specialists, there's artistic and rhythmic, and so they can compete in their 20s. But you really don't think about it at the time because you're really all consumed in what you're doing, and so. The good thing is that I had all these skills of hard work and discipline and you know, just determination to go after things, which was able to lead on to other things in my life. But when you're training like that, you don't think about retirement. You just think about your next meet.
What lessons from your days in rhythmic gymnastics, what lessons have carried over to now?
The hard work. The hard work, I would say. You know, I'm running the Gymnastics Foundation, and it just expanded to Detroit. So I've got a lot of staff I've got to do. I've got to raise a lot of money. It's constant, and it's actually a challenging time right now as we're doing staffing. There are a lot of moving parts, but I will say the perseverance to be able to stick it out and to have a high level of work ethic, to be able to take on a lot of, you know, different tasks at the same time and follow them through. All of that, I think, comes from my gymnastics training. You just have to do it. Sometimes you get hurt. You have to be able to push yourself. If you get sick, you know, if the meet's that day, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to skip this meet and go. You have to be able to perform when you have to. And so all of those skills have served me well.
And where did the idea for the Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation come about? How did that start?
So I was coaching, and I coached Alliann Back Row Wilson. She was my gymnast, and she competed in the 1996 Olympics, and it was great. But as an elite coach, I could really only, even with an assistant, maybe 20 girls I could really reach out to, and I very much miss working in grassroots. And I also noticed that, you know, after, I hadn't even retired for 10 years, but after like 8 years or so, there weren't many more blacks in the sport. And so I really wanted to go back to grassroots. So the United States Olympic Committee was trying to fund emerging sports, and it's twofold. At the time, I was president of the Women's Sports Foundation, so I really kind of understood the importance of having access to sport. And that is in combination with wanting to really provide gymnastics to give the same opportunity that I had. And so I kind of knew in the back of my mind what that work was going to be. I didn't really. It turned out being much harder than before. But after I sent her to the Olympics, I was like, let me go back to grassroots. And that's, you know, I did that. It's interesting. When you coach and when you're a gymnast, everybody's got to be in the gym. I mean, she used to train at 6 in the morning, so I had to be in the gym at 6 in the morning. So after all of those years of intense hours of training on that level, I was also ready to move on.
And what brought you to New York?
That's a very good question. So Zena and Vladimir had moved to Los Angeles at this time, and so I moved to New York. One of the coaches I was working with, really good friend, Lucy Nixon now, she's actually Janowska Nixon, she's Polish. So she was in New York, and my girlfriend Karen Glover, who was training here, had gone to Princeton. So I moved to New York, and I was training at Princeton, and I ended up, you know, finishing school at New York University in Manhattan. And also, you know, I love New York. I was performing, I did Broadway. I was able to use a lot of my gymnastic skills in the performance arena for many years, so it suited me well, but I was really excited to bring the gymnastics back to Detroit.
And so you were at Wayne State too at one point, right? How
Definitely.
did you end up there?
Well, Wayne State, it was great. I mean, I was in Detroit. I was training like crazy. It's interesting. I started at Wayne State in physical education. Then after about a year, I was like, you know, I've done enough physical education to last me a lifetime. So I switched over to journalism. But Wayne State was great. It was, you know, I really consider myself an alumni of Wayne State because that's where I got my formal training. I was still training in gymnastics. And it's a really wonderful university. So I was able to still train at a high level and attend college at the same time. So it was a really good fit for me.
And one of my questions for you is, if a parent were to ask you why their child should join the Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation and join a program, what would your answer be?
Because, for one, it's great fun, but for two, it really is important that youth participate in sports, and gymnastics is a great base sport. Like, kids should learn how to do gymnastics, they should learn how to swim, they should learn martial arts. There's certain things that gymnastics can teach you, especially young kids, how to control their body, how to be disciplined, and so it's all part of our program. The one thing we do at the Wendy Hilliard Foundation, Gymnastics Foundation, is good gymnastics. Zena Zena or Vladimir would make sure we always have the highest level. So they're getting really great training. But most of all, they're getting the education from a physical level of what kids should have that will last for a lifetime.
And earlier I asked you what's going through your minds when you're during your competing days. Now, teaching kids, what's going through your mind?
It's really quite gratifying, I have to admit. When you're working with kids, and we work with them, our parents are off to the side. The gymnastics schools have the parents watch all the classes, but we kind of separate it so that we can focus and work with the children. But it's very gratifying because, the level of talent that they have initially doesn't really matter. It's how hard they can work. That's really what we're teaching them. We're teaching them the skills to try it over again if it's not right. Gymnastics is very specific. You have to point your toes, you straighten your legs, you just can't throw yourself around. So the relationship that we have with the kids is very rewarding because for us, we're training them to be athletes. We're training them to be strong individuals. And so it's a really wonderful environment to be in.
When you were first starting out the program, were there any challenges?
Sure. It's always about, finding a place to train. We're in the recreation department here in Detroit, so we trained at Tyndall and at Crowell and at Kronk. It was very funny. So we would be upstairs and the boxers would be downstairs. Finding a place to train is always really challenging. Rhythmic gymnasts, you need a high ceiling. We're so excited that we're here at the Joe Dumars Fieldhouse because it's such a beautiful facility. They have really high ceilings. So, we work with the basketball players. They do their thing on the side. We do our gymnastics. So it's always about facilities, and hopefully in the future we'll be building our own gymnastics dedicated facility. That's kind of our long-term plan. But the other challenge is just day in and day out, putting in the time. I have to say my mom and dad were critically, and my sisters also, were so helpful, but also the whole community. Their friends, everybody was supporting us. When we were here in Detroit, we hosted the national championships. We had international exchanges. The Bulgarians would come here to train. Random things, but the city supported us, so that was a really exciting time. So we hope that we can bring that energy back.
You mentioned your mom, your dad, and your coach Zena. Growing up, who had the biggest influence on you?
Oh, well, my parents. There's no doubt about that. My dad passed away in '09, and my mom is with me a lot in New York, so we go back and forth. So, there's no doubt that the parents have the greatest influence. Zena did so much because I spent so much time with her, and she was molding me. I was really, I think, one of her gymnasts that she wanted to kind of carry on her legacy, and that's what's ended up. She passed in 2008. So I would say those three, but of course my parents most of all.
And now again, going back to your teaching days, what are some of the life lessons or gymnastic lessons that Zena taught you that are you still using those now?
Oh, totally, yes. I talked to one of our teammates. She's actually stopped the team. She was with the team early in the day, and she says, well, Wendy, she now does public relations. She says, I always remember whenever there was 5 feet of space, we were performing gymnastics someplace. And Zena did the same thing. We were a highly performance team, and we performed all over Detroit, Cobo Hall, at the Detroit Institute of Arts. It was really interesting because she always wanted to promote the sport of gymnastics. So that has carried with me. And really the fact that, she was very simple. She says, if it's not going to be good gymnastics, don't even bother. It's like, you just either have to work really hard to make it really great or don't do it at all. That has stayed with me because the level of excellence that I demand out of my kids, whether they're beginners or elite, having to be pushed to be the best you can be is a very important skill that you should have and stay with you for the rest of your life.
And growing up, we talked about your childhood a little bit. It wasn't the average childhood, what you did in your teen years. So what would people say? Most kids are probably playing or doing homework or while you're out and you're in the overseas competing. What do people say?
It was really, for me, it was exciting, but, I went to Cass Tech and I was a cheerleader. I really used it because I could flip and use all my gymnastic skills. But you just have to balance it all. Yeah. So the thing is, my life was very full because I had to practice and I had to study, and I still had a social life. Not as social as most people, but in the end, I was able to see the world. So you have to make choices, and everyone has to make choices. And I think the more busy kids are with other things is a really good thing, which is another reason why parents should have their kids going to gymnastics, because then they're not going to be on their phones, at least for an hour. But you know, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I have a lot of really great friends, and they supported me, and we kind of experienced it all together. But yeah, I was a tad busy, but it was worth it.
What advice would you give to someone who would want to follow your footsteps and possibly compete in the international level or for the national team?
Just be willing to put in the work. There's really no easy way. It's not rocket science. It's just you have to practice day in and day out, and you have to look more long term. Here's the thing, and I tell a lot of my parents when they think their kids are really, you know, talented, I'm like, they have to really love gymnastics. I was cray-cray about gymnastics. I had to do it all the time, and that's what drove me to practice so much and want to do it. So the most important thing when you want to achieve something on a high level is you have to have the drive. You have to have the passion for it, to put in the hours and to do it when you don't want to do it. That is really the key to success. And so, you know, as I pass it on to other kids, or what really motivated me is that I really, really wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it at a high level. So if you don't have that energy, if you don't have that passion for it, it's going to be difficult to put in the hard work.
And as a rhythmic gymnast, when you're out there with the apparatus, are you out there in your own world? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about your next move in the routine? What's going through your mind?
Oh yeah, you're thinking move after move. So remember that they're judging you on everything, how you go with the music, how you toss it. You have to think about each element. I mean, it's the ultimate of hand-eye coordination, but it doesn't stop. Once the music stops, you just have to concentrate on each move, because if you don't, that's the kind of the thing, to be able to concentrate continuously and just make adjustments when you need to, because things happen. That's the thing, and that's I said why we practice. If something goes a little wrong, you have to be able to adjust really quickly. And sometimes if you make a mistake, you just have to pick it up and keep going. That's the hardest thing, because in your mind you know that these points came off, but you can't stop what you're doing. So you know, once it goes, it's a constant battle to do what you need to do, which will get you to the next point. And if you make a mistake, overcome it and keep moving on.
Do you have a favorite gymnast right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I like all gymnasts. No, I will have to say, ooh, that's a good question. Well, I'm a huge fan of Gabby Douglas.
Okay.
I am. I don't think the fact that she was able to come back and make another Olympic team, I mean, it gets harder and harder, but she was a rock star. She was, you know, really such a contributing effort to the U.S. winning the gold again. Also, you know, Dominique Dawes, I've been able to know these gymnasts over the years, and Dominique also had that ability to come back. You know, she did 3 Olympic teams, which in the sport of gymnastics is huge. Remember, the Olympics are only every 4 years, so if you do 2 teams, you're putting in a lot of hours of work. I mean, Simone Biles, there's no doubt her talent it's a combination of really great talent and a really great mental capacity to do what she needs to do at the time. Now she's going back to training. You know, all of the current gymnasts are great. I'm a huge fan of men's gymnastics. So Uchimura, who's a Japanese champion, like 5-6-time world champion, 2-time Olympic champion. I like anyone who really puts their own stamp on their sport.
What makes Gabby Douglas or Simone Biles a good gymnast?
Oh, I would say a combination of hard work and talent, and determination. I will have to say. Talent, and parents have to understand this, and everyone has, talent alone will not do it. So when you get talent and hard work, like really great talent and hard work, is when you get a Gabby Douglas and a Simone Biles. But if you have really hard work, you can make it too. I mean, there are definitely athletes that aren't the most talented, but through sheer will and determination and hard work, they can rise to the top. So, you know, it's a hard question, but it's in one way it's very simple. On the other hand, it's just years and years and years of work.
With your expertise, I'm just curious to know, when you're watching gymnastics, when you're watching the Olympics, what are you looking for? You're probably looking at it differently than most people.
Somewhat. You know, I am kind of feeling the head game in a way, right? So, and I've gone to every Olympics. I was in Rio, I was in London. I mean, those times were so exciting. I have to admit, when Gabby Douglas, her second to last event was the balance beam. And I could not have been more nervous to watch that routine, but you feel the energy. Everyone in that London arena was really pushing for her to win, and it's kind of hard to explain, but when I watch gymnastics, for one, I can see, I know what the routines are supposed to look like, right? So I understand that, but it's all a head game, and then it's like a puzzle piece. So this gymnast missed on this, is this gymnast be able to come up, it's very detailed. But I enjoy it, I think, just as much as those that don't understand the sport. I just have a higher level of background knowledge to pull from.
What's the difference between the training and the different forms of gymnastics?
Oh, that's very interesting. So the amount of time is pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. It's just different. So artistic gymnastics just requires a different kind of strength, and especially upper body strength. And in rhythmic gymnastics, it's about timing. We actually do probably more repetitions, and because we're a bit more artistic because all of our routines are to music. Trampoline and tumbling. Trampoline is also an Olympic event. That's a timing thing, and trampoline is so tough because I have a trampoline team in New York, and if you make one small mistake, you just bounce off the wrong way. I mean, I've seen, it's really heartbreaking to me. At least in rhythmic, you have 4 routines. You have 4 routines in girls artistic, 6 in men's. But in trampoline, you have like 2 routines, and if one is off, that's it. You're done. So it's like each sport, each discipline in the sport, and there's also acrobatics where they do hand balancing. It has its own beauty and its own type of physicality, but it's all gymnastics. Gymnastics is movement either on or with apparatus, right? And so it's being able to control. It's all about control. That's all I can say. It's all about control. There's artistic gymnasts control on the beam or on the bars. In rhythmic gymnastics, we have to control the apparatus, and in the end, it's your mind control because your body is just doing some really wild and crazy things. So you have to use and feel confident in your training and your ability to really be able to be successful.
How much of it is mental compared to physical?
It's mental. When it gets to competition, it's all mental. Everybody's trained a lot. Everybody's trained a lot. And that's why I say when you say what I watch at Olympic sports, it's how tough you are mentally. In the end, that's the end game. And you can be, who cares? You can look fabulous in practice, but if you don't do it when it counts, that's the hard part.
Wendy, I know you just flew in yesterday. What's your favorite part about coming back home?
Because it's Detroit. I really feel it's interesting. I went running today, and the Detroiters have a certain type of energy. I feel very comfortable being here. It's a lovely time of the year. It's a beautiful out with the trees. But I always love coming home to Detroit because it's so familiar, and I'm so excited that all the Detroiters are really working hard to get the city back on its feet, and I totally have confidence in that. So I'm happy to be part of the movement, and I always feel good when I come home.
My final question for you, what would you like to accomplish in the future with the Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation?
I want more and more kids to be able to have access to gymnastics without the cost. I think that's key. I think it's really important. Gymnastics, as popular as it is, it also has this level of, there's some barriers, right? Either the cost is a lot, the equipment's a lot, the amount of times parents have to dedicate to young children. People don't understand that part, but if you start pretty young, someone's got to get you to practice. So the Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation, we really want to be in the community so that it's not like driving an hour and a half to practice. It's not about that. So, the expansion to Detroit showed us that we can do it in different areas, and hopefully this will be the first of many expansions. But let's do one thing at a time really great, get our center here and get the athletes up, and then hopefully we can take it beyond that.
Hey, thank you again for joining us, Wendy. This was great.
It was my
Loved
pleasure.
having you.
Thank you.
Thank you.